You have found the signal. Amplify it. This is Eyes on Intel.
Before we dive into the dark, we have to take a moment to thank you, our listeners. Your material support is the only reason these deep dives are possible. Tracking corporate logistics, untangling federal court records, and pulling these blueprints into the light takes immense time and resources. You make this exposure possible. For those new to the network, today's deep dive is a terrifying look at the systemic disappearance of pregnant minors in U.S. immigration enforcement. We uncover how the government uses highly visible, deeply profitable detention centers like Dilley, which generated $538.2 million in a single quarter for CoreCivic, as a massive public decoy. While the media and advocates are distracted by the spectacle of Dilley, the state quietly funnels the most vulnerable population, unaccompanied pregnant minors, into a secretive void in San Benito, Texas, operated by the contractor Urban Strategies, LLC. Trapped in a state with a near-total abortion ban and denied specialized medical care, these girls were intentionally isolated from legal advocates. Then, utilizing private security transports like MVM, Inc., the system secretly disappeared these minors and their newborn U.S. citizen infants to bypass the courts and quietly enforce an executive order ending birthright citizenship. By the time congressional oversight arrived to inspect the facility on April 24, 2026, the rooms were sanitized and the girls were simply gone. To keep uncovering these operations, we need your help. If you want more investigations like this and have the means, please consider donating to fund our research infrastructure. If you can't contribute financially, we need you to amplify the signal. Share this episode, send it to a friend, and talk about what happened in San Benito. We refuse to paywall survival. This information belongs in the ledger. Help us put it there.
You know, when you watch a really good magic trick, the secret is it's almost never in the actual mechanics of the trick itself.
Right, it's the misdirection.
Exactly. It is all about the misdirection. The magician stands up on stage, right, waving this brightly colored silk handkerchief with her right hand, creating this huge, unmissable spectacle.
Yeah, making absolutely sure every single eye in the room is locked onto that moving hand.
Because if you're staring intently at the right hand, you are completely ignoring the left hand.
And the left hand is the one operating in the shadows, quietly, slipping the coin into a pocket or making the card disappear.
Right. And today we are taking a deep dive into a governmental system that seems to operate on that exact same principle. But instead of coins or playing cards, we're talking about human beings.
Specifically, unaccompanied pregnant teenagers and their newborn infants.
Yeah. We're unpacking an incredibly detailed, highly investigative source document today. It's titled The Architecture of Erasure: The Systemic Disappearance of Pregnant Minors in San Benito.
And the mission of this deep dive is really to break down this intricate, dual-track machinery of modern U.S. immigration enforcement. The document actually refers to this dynamic as the spectacle versus the void.
It is a massive, highly coordinated system. But before we get too deep into this, I need to give you a quick heads up if you're listening.
Yeah, a very important disclaimer.
Right. We are looking at a highly debated, deeply investigative text today. This document, it pulls no punches. It names specific political thoughts across the spectrum, left-wing and right-wing, and details some highly controversial policies.
From different administrations, too.
Exactly. So our goal today isn't to take a political side or, endorse these specific claims or make political statements. We're strictly here to impartially report the factual claims and ideas contained strictly within the provided source material.
We're just looking at the architecture described in the text, unpacking how the author claims these parts move.
Yes, exactly. Because the central mystery of this document is undeniably chilling. We're talking about how dozens of highly monitored, unaccompanied pregnant minors and their U.S. citizen infants seemingly just vanished from a government facility.
Right before a major congressional oversight visit, no less.
That's crazy. So to understand how they disappeared, we have to start by looking at that brightly colored handkerchief, right?
Yeah.
The right hand waving in the air, the decoy.
The spectacle.
The spectacle. Now, the source focuses heavily on the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, Texas.
Oh, the Dilley facility, right.
Yeah. When you read the source's description of Dilley, it paints a picture of a facility that functions as the ultimate decoy. It is massive. It's highly visible. And honestly, the text argues it's practically designed to capture media attention and generate political friction.
It's like a giant lightning rod for public outrage.
Exactly. You hear these harrowing, constant reports coming out of Dilley. We're talking repeated 911 calls for children in acute medical distress, stories of contaminated food, reports of severe psychological torment. It totally consumes the public bandwidth.
It takes up all the oxygen in the room.
Right. But here is where it gets really interesting, at least from an institutional perspective. The financial machinery keeping that specific spectacle running is just staggering.
Oh, the economics are a crucial part of how the decoy functions.
The text details how, in early 2025, the Department of Homeland Security entirely bypassed standard competitive bidding rules. They basically declared a border emergency to rapidly reactivate Dilley.
Wow, bypassing the bidding process entirely.
Entirely. And the financial windfall for the private corporations running it was immediate. CoreCivic, which is one of the primary operators, secured an agreement to care for thousands of people. The source notes they reported over $500 million, $538.2 million to be exact, in total revenue just during the second quarter of 2025.
Just in one quarter, that's a massive amount of money.
Right. And they had like $103.3 million in adjusted EBITDA. The document points out that leadership at CoreCivic, specifically executives like Damon T. Heininger and Patrick D. Swindle, locked in massive assets specifically tied to the Dilley lease.
It really binds institutional investors to the system.
Yeah, it creates a massive incentive to keep the spectacle loud and operational. And they aren't the only ones cashing in. Target Hospitality is another major player mentioned in the text.
Right. They operate as a subcontractor, don't they?
Yeah, providing what they call facility and hospitality solutions. They secured a long-term contract expected to generate $246 million in fixed minimum revenue, pushed by their executives, Brad Archer and Troy Schwenk.
Wait, a fixed minimum revenue contract?
Yeah.
So that means they are guaranteed a massive payout even if the facility is completely empty.
That is exactly what the source highlights. The payouts are guaranteed regardless of occupancy. Imagine renting a massive hotel complex indefinitely, and the government agrees to pay full price whether every single room is booked or the entire place is completely abandoned.
The money flows no matter what. The financial incentive is just locked in.
Right. So if you are a journalist or a legal advocate or, a congressional oversight committee trying to monitor human rights abuses, the sheer scale of the money and the controversy at Dilley is going to exhaust all your resources.
It acts as that waving flag.
Exactly. You are going to spend all your time filing lawsuits and freedom of information requests about Dilley, which really prompts the ultimate question. If Dilley is the right hand waving in the air, distracting everyone with a $500 million spectacle.
What is the left hand doing in the dark?
Exactly what is happening in the shadows.
Well, the left hand is operating what the source calls the void.
The void. Okay, walk me through this.
So if the spectacle at Dilley is loud, chaotic, and highly visible, the void is quiet, it's obscured, and it's designed for absolute silent containment. And the thematic shift here in the document is really stark.
How so?
We move from that sprawling corporate mega facility down to a quiet converted Baptist church about 3 hours south in San Benito, Texas.
Okay, the Refugio San Benito facility.
Exactly. And this one is operated by a for-profit contractor called Urban Strategies, LLC.
Right, led by Lisa Cummins and Pelham Bowlers, according to the text.
Yes. Now, publicly, this group markets itself around community development and faith-based initiatives. But the federal spending data highlighted in the text tells a different story.
Yeah, the numbers here are wild, too.
Right. They hold a $44.3 million federal assistance award, plus an $18.8 million rapid replacement grant. And this quiet, heavily funded, seemingly innocuous facility became the focal point for a deeply troubling, covert policy shift.
Which brings us to that July 2025 directive the document focuses so heavily on.
Yes. The July 22 directive. Historically, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR, placed pregnant teens in specialized shelters or foster homes across the U.S.
Because they needed specific medical care, right?
Exactly. In fact, under established legal settlements, specifically the TVPRA and Field Guidance Number 21 from the Garza v. Hargan case, the government was required to prioritize placing these pregnant youths in states where they could access full, comprehensive obstetric and reproductive health care.
Okay, so they had a legal obligation to put them in safe states.
They did. But on July 22, 2025, that standard of care was basically covertly terminated. The text states that HHS Chief of Staff Matt O'Neill-Levine issued a chilling directive to ORR Acting Director Angie Salazar.
And what was the directive?
to funnel all pregnant minors exclusively to this single facility in San Benito.
But wait, didn't that bypass those exact legal frameworks you just mentioned?
It did. The administration justified it by using the Hyde Amendment and Executive Order 14182 to prohibit using federal money to transport these minors across state lines. They essentially trapped them in Texas.
Okay, I want to unpack this for a second. I get the concept of a shadow facility, a void. But why concentrate them in San Benito? Because, I mean, if that specific facility was known to be totally inadequate, wouldn't putting high-risk pregnant teenagers there just create a massive liability for the government?
You would think so, yes. But the expert analysis in the document points out that child welfare was no longer the objective here.
Oh.
Yeah, reproductive control was the ultimate ideological goal. What we're seeing is the weaponization of geography.
The weaponization of geography. That's a heavy phrase.
It is. Think about it. Texas enforces one of the strictest abortion bans in the nation. It criminalizes the procedure in nearly all circumstances, even in cases of rape.
Right.
By intercepting these girls, many of whom, the source notes, were pregnant as a direct result of sexual violence endured on their journey to the border, and concentrating them in San Benito, the system trapped them.
Trapped them in a jurisdiction where they simply could not terminate their pregnancies.
Exactly. The void wasn't designed to offer specialized care. It was designed to act as a state-sanctioned geographical prison. The medical liability was just considered an acceptable risk to achieve the ideological outcome of forced gestation.
God, that is incredibly heavy. And the medical peril the source describes inside this facility, I mean, it is catastrophic.
It really is. The text details these isolated wards inside the San Benito facility that insiders grimly referred to as the blue butterfly rooms.
And we have to remember the history of this specific facility to understand how dangerous this actually was.
Yeah.
Because just a year prior, in 2024, the government had actually barred the San Benito facility from taking pregnant minors entirely.
Oh, right, due to severe medical negligence.
Yeah, they were failing to arrange critical medical appointments.
Yeah.
They were dangerously discharging girls without any care plans. They were only allowed to resume taking pregnant teens after what insiders admitted was a purely cosmetic remediation plan.
They didn't even hire specialized medical staff to handle the new influx.
It's insane. It's like setting up a trauma ward in a desert and forbidding anyone from bringing in water.
You know, the perfect analogy.
You are taking 13-year-old girls whose pelvic structures aren't fully developed, girls dealing with profound malnutrition, severe trauma, exhaustion, and you are putting them in a place completely unequipped to handle high-risk adolescent pregnancies.
Right, we're talking extreme risks here. Preeclampsia, systemic infection, obstructed labor.
And this is where the weaponization of the local laws becomes truly dangerous.
Yes, because local Texas doctors were terrified of intervening in obstetric emergencies due to state laws criminalizing abortion.
They could face severe criminal penalties, including prison time.
Exactly. So an ectopic pregnancy or a partial miscarriage could easily become fatal for these young girls simply because local doctors might delay life-saving care out of fear of state prosecution.
That extreme medical peril basically created a ticking clock, placing such a highly vulnerable population in an inadequate shadowed void. It eventually attracted the exact scrutiny the void was meant to avoid.
Right. It was a countdown to erasure. The facility essentially became a powder keg.
Which brings us to the congressional confrontation that blows the lid off this whole thing. Let's map out this timeline because it moves fast.
Okay, so in early April 2026, Representative Joaquin Castro visits the San Benito facility.
And he actually sees this with his own eyes, right?
He does. He sees the reality of that July 2025 directive. He sees pregnant teenagers, and he notes seeing at least 3 newborn infants asleep in cribs in these wards.
Wow. So the babies are already there.
Yes. And that visit triggers major alarms in Washington. Shortly after, Representative Maxine Dexter schedules an oversight visit for April 24, 2026.
Now, Representative Dexter is a really important figure here because she is one of the few physicians serving in Congress.
Exactly. She isn't just a politician, she is a medical professional. She knows exactly what a high-risk maternity ward requires to operate safely, so she immediately demands answers from the department secretaries. She wants to know from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and from Angie Salazar why the San Benito facility lacks basic critical obstetric equipment.
Like glucometers and fetal Dopplers, which the text specifically mentions.
Exactly. The absolute worst nightmare for a facility trying to hide medical inadequacy is a doctor showing up with federal oversight authority.
But when Representative Dexter actually arrives at the facility on April 24, things take a dark turn. The staff claims there were only 7 girls left.
Wait, really? Only 7?
Yeah, and they physically block her from accessing the wards. The original girls and those 3 newborns that Representative Castro had seen just weeks prior, they are entirely gone.
Just vanish.
The blue butterfly rooms have been sanitized. They disappeared.
Which brings us to the real climax of the machinery the document lays out, the logistics of disappearance. How do highly monitored, documented individuals and their newborn U.S. citizen infants just vanish from federal custody?
And why? I mean, why go through the trouble of vanishing them instead of just transferring them to another facility?
The why points directly to a specific executive order. Executive Order 14160, issued in January 2025 by President Trump.
Okay, the order aimed at ending birthright citizenship.
Right. This order directed federal agencies to refuse to issue or recognize documents of U.S. citizenship for children born on American soil if their parents were unlawfully present in the country.
Ah, I see.
Because these unaccompanied minors were undocumented, their newborn infants who were unequivocally American citizens under the 14th Amendment were suddenly considered an administrative and ideological threat.
They didn't fit the new rules.
Exactly. The system needed them expunged to enforce the spirit of the new executive order.
But wait, wasn't that executive order challenged in court? I mean, I remember hearing that lower courts blocked it because it violated the Constitution.
It was challenged, yes, and lower courts did quickly issue injunctions to block it. But here is where the source details a highly complex procedural backdoor at the Supreme Court.
A backdoor?
Yeah. The Supreme Court issued a 6-3 procedural ruling that stayed those universal nationwide injunctions, specifically referencing a case called Barbara v. Trump.
Okay, so what does that actually mean in practice?
Think of the Supreme Court ruling like a VIP pass. The court essentially said, yes, this deportation order might be unconstitutional, but we are only going to legally protect the specific people who actively filed this lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
The universal shield was dropped. You only got protection if you had a lawyer who could get your name on a legal injunction.
Oh, I see exactly where this is going. Because the girls trapped in the blue butterfly rooms in San Benito, they were isolated in a shadow facility, right?
Right.
With zero access to phones, zero access to advocates or legal counsel. They couldn't file lawsuits. They couldn't ask for that VIP pass.
Exactly. So the government was no longer legally barred from enforcing the deportation order against them and their babies. They could enforce the order against anyone who didn't have a lawyer to stop them.
That's a massive loophole.
It is. And to make absolutely sure these girls didn't get lawyers, the system utilized a strategy of prolonged detention. The source points to previous lawsuits, like Jane P. v. Salazar, that exposed this exact playbook.
Right, where stays jumped from like 30 days to over 117 days.
Yes. The government would intentionally hold these minors in custody for hundreds of days, well past their due dates. By keeping them locked in an isolated facility throughout their entire pregnancies and deliveries, the births were kept entirely off the public grid.
It's a complete information blackout. Because if nobody knows the babies are born, nobody can file a lawsuit to protect their citizenship rights.
Exactly. And then, when congressional scrutiny from Representative Dexter threatened to break that blackout and expose this covert enforcement, the system activated the physical logistics of disappearance.
They had to move fast.
Right. The government didn't simply lose these girls. As the text notes, the federal system tracks every single unaccompanied child with granular precision. They didn't lose them. They used private contractors to silently deport the mothers and their U.S. citizen infants before Congress could intervene.
Right. Enter MVM, Inc.
Yes, MVM, Inc. They are a private security contractor headquartered in Virginia.
And the federal government essentially subcontracts the physical movement of human bodies to them. They act like a highly secretive corporate delivery service for human beings.
It's a massive operation. MVM holds these master vehicle contracts with the government with a ceiling of $372.4 million. The source notes that in early 2026 alone, they received a recent $62.2 million task order explicitly for transporting unaccompanied children.
The source actually mentions their corporate job postings for what they call travel chaperones.
Travel chaperones.
Yeah, these are contractors who take physical custody of children with virtually no notice. Sometimes just 30 minutes warning. They load them onto unmarked vans and private charter planes. It is quite literally a blueprint of midnight removals.
Wow.
The source compares it to previous tactics exposed in court, like the LGMLV Noam case, where the administration tried to summarily expel hundreds of children in the middle of the night over a holiday weekend, literally loading them onto planes at 1 a.m. before a judge could wake up to stop it.
Which raises an important point about the legal brilliance and the profound moral horror of this strategy.
How so?
Well, in those past cases, lawyers were sometimes able to file an emergency lawsuit in the middle of the night to stop the flights right on the tarmac. But the girls in San Benito were systematically isolated in an urban strategies facility that barred outside access.
Right, there were no lawyers to file an emergency injunction. There was no one to stop the vans. So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the whole board, from the $500 million spectacle in Dilley to the shadow vans in San Benito, you realize the dark genius of the system is the privatization of accountability.
The privatization of accountability, that's a great way to put it.
Right. By using a private, faith-based contractor to hide the girls and a private security firm to quietly move them in the middle of the night, the government creates an impenetrable shield.
Yeah.
When Congress demands answers or journalists file freedom of information requests, the private staff just refuse to answer the door. The federal agencies hide behind contracted data management and claim it's out of their hands. It perfectly insulates the decision makers.
It perfectly synthesizes the spectacle versus the void. The system uses the loud, incredibly expensive spectacle of mega facilities like Dilley to absorb all the public outrage and distract the media.
It gives everyone a target to yell at.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the surgical silent erasure of the most vulnerable people happens in the shadow of the void.
Which brings us to why you, the listener, should care about this. Even if immigration isn't an issue you follow closely, or even if you fall on different sides of the border debate, this deep dive reveals something fundamental and terrifying about modern institutional power.
Absolutely. The architecture described in this document proves that massive bureaucracies can flawlessly execute legally dubious, life-altering operations entirely in the dark.
Yeah.
By blending private corporate logistics with procedural judicial loopholes like that Supreme Court VIP pass we talked about, the state can effectively bypass constitutional protections without ever explicitly breaking the administrative rules on paper.
They didn't break the law. They found the seams in it.
Exactly.
They're the ultimate magic trick. But, the trick only works if you don't know where to look. If you keep staring at the brightly colored handkerchief, you miss the coin disappearing into the pocket. And that leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought for you to mull over, based on the architecture we've explored today. If the government has successfully built a blueprint to use private contractors and legal blind spots to bypass the Constitution and secretly deport a highly vulnerable demographic of newborn U.S. citizens,
what is stopping that exact same architectural machinery from being turned against other groups of citizens in the future?
Exactly. If the blueprint exists, who is next? Keep your eyes on the shadows.
This has been an Eyes on Ice Investigate special made possible by our subscribers. To all who want to cut into the darkness and bring the horrors to light, we say thank you. And as always, please remember open hearts, open minds. Until next time.